Hello and thanks for stopping by. London is well connected to many seaside towns, especially those on the south coast, with places like Brighton, Bournemouth, Clacton, Margate and so on, all being just a train ride away. In the era before package holidays and cheap airline travel, these rail links were especially important, as the majority of British sun-seekers opted to take their summer breaks at UK resorts, which made London's mainline terminals very busy places indeed. This footage, for example, taken at Waterloo, shows crowds of people queuing for trains to the coast on one hectic bank holiday back in 1945. Between 1910 and 1939, it was even possible to catch the London Underground out to Southend-on-Sea, as the District Railway, now of course the District Line, ran special seasonal trains to and from there. What happens though if you find yourself stuck in London and can't make it to the seaside? Well, the closest you'll get in the capital, of course, is a stroll along the Thames, which can in fact be rather bracing. You certainly can't beat its cool breeze on a sweltering summer's day. Personally, I find a walk along the river is even better when combined with a trip to the lovely rural borough of Greenwich, which with its quaint pubs, the old Royal Naval College, and the magnificent Cutty Sark, really does give you the impression of being in an historic seaside town. Not too far from Greenwich, alongside Bermondsey Wall East, there's also the tiny Bermondsey Beach, which is a real oasis of calm, especially if you're lucky enough to have it to yourself, as I do here. This short stretch of shingle is just a 5-minute walk from Bermondsey tube station, so I guess you could say, technically, that it's possible to catch the Jubilee line to the beach. As a disclaimer, I should say here that if you fancy visiting Bermondsey Beach, please do be aware that the Thames is tidal, and when the tide becomes high, it rushes in pretty fast, so do be sure to check the tide times before you go. I'll leave a link in the description where you can do just that. Greenwich and Bermondsey aside, there was a time back in the 20th century when inner London was blessed with a far more substantial beach, a proper sandy one, and it was located right outside the Tower of London. This mini Riviera was the brainchild of Reverend Philip Thomas Bayard Clayton, more affectionately known as Tubby Clayton. Tubby, who's honoured with a blue plaque on the junction of Cooper's Row and Trinity Square, close to Tower Hill Station, was born in Queensland, Australia, but moved to England when he was 2 years old. He later went on to study theology at Oxford and was ordained in 1910. As soon as the Great War erupted in 1914, Tubby volunteered to be an army chaplain, and during his time in service, he helped establish a rest house in Flanders, known as Talbot House, where serving soldiers could gain some brief respite from the horror. Talbot House was open to all, and the only stipulation for those visiting was that they left their rank at the door, for it was a place where Tubby insisted that all men were treated with equal humanity. Some years after the war, in 1922, Tubby became the vicar of All-Hallows-by-the-Tower, which, as the name suggests, is a church situated right next door to the Tower of London. In the early 1920s, the area around All Hallows and Tower Hill was pretty grotty, a smoky industrial place blighted by a number of unsightly buildings. Its appearance certainly wasn't befitting of the long and important history associated with it. It was for this reason, therefore, in 1933, that Tubby Clayton published a booklet entitled The Pageant of Tower Hill, in which he set out a scheme for improving the area. This included creating a number of parks and open spaces, along with presenting the finest portions of London's ancient Roman wall. Sprucing up the entrance to Mark Lane Station, which at the time was the closest underground stop to the Tower of London, was also suggested. Mark Lane, by the way, is now a ghost station. It closed in 1967 and was replaced with the present Tower Hill Station. Because his parish was on the edge of London's East End, Tubby was well aware of the appalling poverty which existed there, and knew that some families were so destitute, a holiday was the last thing they could afford. With this in mind, and perhaps inspired by his Aussie roots, Tubby suggested that the improvements to Tower Hill should therefore also incorporate a man-made beach, a tidal playground for children as he dubbed it, which would be of a special benefit to the local poor. The muddy strip of shoreline proposed for the beach, which lay right before the Tower of London and its infamous Traitor's Gate, was in fact already popular with children. Well, the naughty ones anyway, as it wasn't unknown for kids to sneak down there for a cheeky exploration. At the time, however, this land was strictly private, the property of the Crown no less, meaning any child caught down there could be accused of trespass. The area was also dangerous, with its sludgy banks and the unforgiving tides of the Thames having claimed a number of young lives over the years. Creating a safe beach, therefore, seemed like a decent thing to do, and so after King George V personally granted permission to use the land, work on the project began. Although this involved the arduous task of shipping in some 1,500 barge loads of sand from the Essex coastline, the work, which was carried out for free by the Modern construction firm, didn't take long to complete, and Tower Beach as it became known, although some referred to it as a Lido, was officially opened by Lord Wakefield on the afternoon of Monday the 23rd of July 1934. At the ceremony, in which Lord Wakefield promised the beach would be free to use forever, crowds of children were given free buns and chocolates, along with plenty of lemonade to wash it down, whilst the band played, and the many passing boats on the Thames gave a blast of their horns. Tower Beach, which was 1,000 foot long and 50 foot wide, proved an immediate success, and before long, up to 2,000 people, mainly children and mothers, were visiting it every day. A number of London hospitals even sent their patients there to convalesce. The beach was blessed with a real community spirit, with entertainment and activities held on most days. This included clowns, ventriloquist acts, Punch and Judy shows, tug-of-war competitions, three-legged races, short boat trips, and sandcastle competitions, in which toys were handed out as prizes. Free snacks were dished out too, including sweets, toffee apples, and even slices of watermelon. As the Belfast Telegraph noted in September 1938, Tower Beach was the place to go if you wanted to get an idea of how typical Cockney kids enjoy themselves. The beach was open between April and October, with the hours varying depending on tides. Safety was strictly enforced. In August 1934, for example, not long after Tower Beach first opened, Lord Wakefield issued a leaflet detailing the rules. "Don't try to dive off Tower Pier," it read. "There is 9 foot of soft mud around the pier. If you dive in, you may stick your head in the mud and have to swallow some. Older boys and girls are asked to keep an eye on toddlers, even if they don't belong to you. Do not throw stones at one another or into the water. We want to keep the gravel on the beach." Lord Wakefield also issued a grave warning to anyone thinking of venturing too far out into the river. "Not even the best channel swimmer," he said, "can swim against the Thames tide." Further safety measures included an emergency ladder, which was in addition to the 2 existing staircases, along with a warden to patrol the beach, and a boat moored nearby, which was constantly manned in case anyone got into trouble in the water. As such, Tower Beach had a relatively good safety record, although there were a number of incidents over the years in which several youngsters drowned. On rare occasions, there was vandalism too. In July 1937, for instance, it was reported that, quote, "hooligans have recently amused themselves by destroying lifebuoys and flinging deck chairs in the Thames." The beach was beefed up in 1938 when stacks of sandbags, which had been stockpiled as fears over a potential war with Germany increased, were dumped there after it was considered they were no longer needed. Which in hindsight was rather rash, wasn't it? Unsurprisingly, when war did break out in 1939, Tower Beach was forced to close, although it reopened as soon as possible after the war and remained popular throughout the 1950s and 60s. This image shows a group of children watching a seaplane from the beach in September 1956. As fun as Tower Beach sounds, it must be remembered that for much of the 20th century, the Thames was very heavily polluted. Concerns about this had been voiced as far back as 1937, when one report claimed the river was a menace to health. "If the summer is a dry one," the article said, "the Thames, from the heart of London to below Tilbury, may become little better than a sewer. Every incoming tide carries vast quantities of sewage upstream to Tower Beach, where thousands of East End mothers allow their children to play." Although Lord Wakefield had once stated his belief that Tower Beach would be open to the children of London as long as the river runs under London Bridge, the pollution had grown so terrible by the early 1970s that the stretch of sand was finally closed to the public for good. Remnants of Tower Beach can still be glimpsed today, although as you can see it looks rather grubby nowadays, with only the seagulls being able to enjoy it. In 2004, a group named Reclaim the Beach was formed to campaign for the reopening of Tower Beach, but as of yet, their efforts have sadly come to nothing. Although on the odd occasion, it is possible to take a guided walk along the beach. I'll leave a link for that below. Although the beach is now off limits, there is an alternative oasis of calm nearby. That's being the wonderful All-Hallows-by-the-Tower church, which is a peaceful and very welcoming place. The history of All Hallows can be traced all the way back to the year AD 675, and in recognition of this, the crypt contains a small but fascinating museum, which includes a section of original tiled Roman floor. Back up above meanwhile, you can see the tomb of Tubby Clayton, the man who brought Tower Beach to London, complete with an effigy of his beloved little dog, Chippy. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at London's forgotten beach. If you have any memories of Tower Beach, whether they be your own or those of an older family member, please do let me know about them in the comments, as I'd love to hear them. As always, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who've left such kind comments recently. And if you're a new subscriber, welcome. It's great to have you here. If you haven't yet subscribed, I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, because this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish any future content. Likes and shares are also very welcome, as they really do help the channel to grow. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip via either my Ko-fi account, the link for which I'll provide below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon below the video. Any such donations are of course very greatly appreciated. If you're interested in merchandise, I have an Etsy store too, Rob's Online Designs, where you can purchase an array of London themed mugs, featuring hand illustrated designs of taxis, tube trains, buses and so on. Links in the description. For now, thanks again friends, stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.